Hanoi, September 2, 1945. In Ba Dinh Square, beneath a pale late summer sky, a thin man in a simple khaki tunic stepped before a microphone. His beard was gray, his voice calm. Yet his words announced the birth of the Democratic Republic of Vietnam. After decades of French rule and several years of Japanese occupation, Ho Chi Minh declared that Vietnam had the right to be free. To many in the crowd, he embodied the struggle for independence. To foreign governments, however, he was more complicated. A nationalist, a communist, an organizer shaped by international revolution, and a political survivor who had spent much of his life moving between continents and identities. Even the name Ho Chi Minh was not the name he carried as a child. The generally accepted account places his birth on May 19, 1890 in Hong Tru, a village in Nay An province in central Vietnam, then part of French Indochina. He was born Nguyen Sinh Cung. Later he became known as Nguyen Tat Ton and would use many other names. Records from his early life are incomplete, and some dates he gave to foreign authorities do not match the official chronology. The year 1890 is widely accepted, but not every detail of his childhood can be verified with equal confidence. His father, Nguyen Sinh Sac, had risen through the demanding Confucian examination system and entered imperial service. He belonged to a scholarly world that still looked toward the Vietnamese court and classical Chinese learning, even as French power transformed the country. His mother, Hong Thi Loan, died in 1901 while her son was still a boy. Nguyen Tat Ton grew up between two orders. One was the old Vietnam of village customs, ancestral duties, and Confucian scholarship. The other was the colonial system, French officials, new schools, heavy taxation, and a hierarchy that gave Vietnamese subjects little political power. He later studied in Hue, the imperial capital. A Vietnamese emperor remained on the throne, but decisive authority rested with France. Later biographies often associate Ton with the anti-tax demonstrations of 1908. His exact role remains uncertain, and the evidence does not support every claim made about his participation. What is clear is that he left the formal educational path and moved south. For a time, he taught at Duc Ton School in Phan Thiet. Then he continued to Saigon, a colonial port crowded with sailors, laborers, merchants, and ships connecting Indochina to the wider world. On June 5, 1911, using the name Van Ba, he joined the French steamship Amiral La Touche Treville as a kitchen worker. He was 21. The vessel pulled away from Saigon and carried him toward Marseille. He left without an army, without wealth, and without a settled political doctrine. The man who would one day confront France and the United States began his long journey below deck in the service of a French ship. Beyond the harbor, an age of empires was waiting. Part 2: Across the Oceans. The Amiral La Touche Treville reached Marseille in July 1911. For Nguyen Tat Ton, France was no longer a distant power represented by colonial officials. It was a country crowded with workers and immigrants living far from imperial wealth. In September, Ton applied to the colonial school, which trained administrators for France's overseas possessions. The document survives, but his motives remain uncertain. He may have seen French education as a path toward helping his country, or simply as an opportunity unavailable in Indochina. Later biographies present every step as part of a plan for liberation. The evidence suggests a young man still searching for direction. His application was rejected. He returned to the sea. During the following years, Ton worked aboard ships and passed through ports in Europe, Africa, and the Americas. His route is difficult to reconstruct. Much of the story comes from memories recorded long afterward. Letters and official files confirm parts of the journey, but large spaces remain blank. A letter postmarked in New York in December 1912 places him in the United States. He may have spent time in New York and Boston. Vietnamese accounts say that he worked in the bakery of Boston's Parker House Hotel. The hotel preserves this tradition, but no surviving employment record confirms it. Stories that he encountered black activists or Korean nationalists remain speculative. Ton saw societies far beyond the colonial world of his youth. He entered cities where wealth existed beside exhausting labor and poverty. He encountered nations that celebrated liberty while denying equality to many within them. These contradictions later appeared in his political writing, although no diary reveals when his ideas formed. By 1913, Tan was probably in Britain. He later described working in London and performing low-paid kitchen labor. Accounts that he trained under the famous chef Auguste Escoffier at the Carlton Hotel became part of his legend, but firm proof has not been found. The length of his stay remains uncertain. Then, in the summer of 1914, Europe descended into war. The conflict drew soldiers and resources from colonies across the world. Men from French Indochina were transported to Europe as troops and laborers, serving an empire that denied them equal political rights. Tan was still an obscure migrant worker, without a party or public following. Yet the war exposed the vulnerability of imperial power. Nations that had appeared permanent were bleeding one another across fields of mud and wire. Tan later said he returned to France during the war. He was in Paris by 1917, although clear police documentation appears only in 1919. He had left Vietnam as a sailor searching for possibilities. He arrived in Paris carrying years of observation, uncertainty, and exile. Soon he would discover that words could travel farther than ships, and that a new name could become a political weapon. Part 3. The Patriot Indiana Paris. After the First World War, Paris was alive with political arguments. Empires had collapsed in Europe, while President Woodrow Wilson spoke of national self-determination. Across the colonial world, those words created hopes the victorious powers had little intention of fulfilling. Nguyen Tat Tan entered a circle of Vietnamese intellectuals with Phan Chau Trinh and lawyer Phan Van Truong. They differed in strategy, but shared opposition to colonial rule. In June 1919, the group presented the Versailles Peace Conference with the demands of the Annamite people. The petition did not call for immediate independence. Its 8 demands included amnesty, legal equality, civil freedoms, and Vietnamese representation in parliament. By later revolutionary standards, it was moderate. The conference ignored it. The document was signed Nguyen Ai Quoc, Nguyen the Patriot. Evidence indicates that the name initially belonged to the wider group, and the petition drew on several people's work. Tan became its public face and adopted the name. French police began recording his meetings and visitors. An obscure migrant worker was becoming a recognizable anti-colonial voice. He wrote articles exposing forced labor, repression, and racial inequality in France's colonies. He joined the French Socialist Party. But European socialists often treated colonial questions as secondary. For Nguyen Ai Quoc, colonialism was the system governing his homeland. In 1920, he encountered Lenin's arguments on the national and colonial question. Lenin insisted that European socialist movements must support struggles against imperial rule in Asia and Africa. Years later, Ho recalled that these ideas moved him profoundly. The emotion comes from his later account and cannot be verified, but the political change is clear. At the Socialist Congress in Tours in December 1920, Nguyen Ai Quoc supported joining the Communist International. The Congress split, and the majority formed what became the French Communist Party. His choice did not erase his Vietnamese nationalism. Communism offered a method, an international network, and allies willing to place colonial liberation near the center of revolutionary politics. In 1921, he helped organize the Intercolonial Union, bringing together activists from French-ruled territories. The following year, they launched Luperia, the Pariah. Its pages carried reports from across the empire. Police watched the newspaper and colonial authorities restricted it, but copies reached Indochina. Nguyen Ai Quoc lived under surveillance and with little money. He earned what he could through photography retouching, while writing and organizing. Paris had given him neither justice nor power. It had given him something dangerous, a political identity. In 1923, he quietly left France for Moscow. The sailor who crossed the oceans was becoming a professional revolutionary. In the Soviet capital, world revolution was waiting. Part 4. Building the Revolution. Moscow in 1923 was the capital of a revolution that had survived civil war and famine. For Nguyen Ai Quoc, it was also the center of the Communist International, which promised to unite separate struggles into a worldwide movement. He studied at the Communist University of the Toilers of the East, where colonial activists learned Marxist theory, propaganda, secret organization, and party discipline. He attended the Fifth Comintern Congress in 1924. Moscow offered knowledge and connections, but demanded loyalty to an increasingly centralized system. Nguyen Ai Quoc was not yet the leader of a mass movement. He was a trainee and Comintern operative attempting to apply European theory to Vietnam. Resistance there was divided among reformers, monarchists, nationalists, and groups favoring political violence. None had an organization capable of challenging France across the colony. Late in 1924, he traveled to Guangzhou. Using the name Lai Tui, he worked near Soviet advisor Mikhail Borodin, who was assisting Sun Yat-sen's nationalist government. Guangzhou was a crossroads where Chinese nationalists, communists, Soviet agents, and Asian revolutionaries shared the streets. Lai Tui contacted young Vietnamese exiles, including members of the radical Tam Tam XA. Instead of isolated assassinations, he argued for patient organization, educate cadres, create disciplined cells, and return trained activists to Vietnam. In June 1925, he helped establish the Vietnamese Revolutionary Youth League. It was not yet a communist party, though communists formed its inner core. Classes taught politics, history, and revolutionary practice. Students crossed the border and built networks inside French Indochina. The League published Thanh Nien, Youth, a Vietnamese newspaper carrying revolutionary ideas home. His lectures were later compiled as The Road to Revolution. Its lesson was clear: courage alone was insufficient. Revolution required theory, discipline, and an organization able to survive arrests. That year, veteran nationalist Phan Boi Chau was seized by French agents in Shanghai. Some historians argue that Nguyen Ai Quoc, or people close to him, helped betray Phan, perhaps to remove a rival or obtain reward money. Other scholars consider the evidence inconclusive. No surviving document proves that Nguyen Ai Quoc personally arranged the arrest, so the allegation cannot be treated as fact. Phan's capture caused outrage in Vietnam. Political activism expanded after reformer Phan Chau Trinh died in 1926. A new generation was entering public life, and the Youth League was ready to recruit it. Guangzhou's alliance collapsed in 1927. Chiang Kai-shek and other nationalist leaders turned violently against communists. Soviet advisors departed, revolutionary groups were hunted, and Lai Tui fled. He had arrived with theories and a borrowed name. He left behind a network. For the first time, his revolution had roots inside Vietnam. Part 5: The Party and the Prison. After fleeing Guangzhou, Nguyen Ai Quoc moved through the routes of international communism. By 1928, he had reached Siam, now Thailand, where Vietnamese communities lived near the Mekong. Under another identity, he taught politics and connected exiles with activists in Vietnam. Dates differ among memoirs, but Comintern reports place him there from mid-1928 until late 1929. The Revolutionary Youth League was fragmenting. Younger militants demanded a communist party, and rival organizations emerged. Their competition divided the underground and increased the danger of arrest. Nguyen Ai Quoc reached Hong Kong near the end of 1929. Acting for the Communist International, he called representatives of the rival groups together. In February 1930, they created the Communist Party of Vietnam. Its program combined national independence with land reform and workers' rights. Under Comintern direction, it became the Indo-Chinese Communist Party, extending its mission to Laos and Cambodia. Tran Phu entered senior leadership. While Nguyen Ai Quoc's nationalism was criticized as insufficiently orthodox. Events inside Vietnam moved faster than the party could control. Economic hardship, rural debt, taxation, and colonial rule fueled strikes and demonstrations. In Nay and Ha Tin during 1930 and 1931, workers and peasants attacked symbols of authority. In some districts, village committees, later called the Nay Tin Soviets, briefly challenged colonial administration. The movement was communist-led, but it also grew from local grievances. Nguyen Ai Quoc supported the struggle from abroad. He did not personally direct every act of violence. French repression was severe. Aircraft bombed demonstrators, troops entered villages, and mass arrests tore through the party. Hundreds were killed, though estimates vary, and thousands were imprisoned. Much of the organization he had built was exposed. On June 6, 1931, British police arrested him in Kowloon without a warrant. He called himself Sung Man Cho, a Chinese national. France wanted him returned to Indochina, where a death sentence issued in his absence placed his life in danger. Lawyer Francis Lusby took up his defense. Hong Kong courts initially permitted his deportation, but appeals reached the Privy Council in London. The legal battle did not decide whether he was a revolutionary. It asked whether Britain could lawfully deliver him into French custody. For nearly 20 months, he remained detained. He suffered illness, and reports circulated that Nguyen Ai Quoc had died. Once again, uncertainty became protection. In January 1933, after negotiations, British authorities released him and allowed him to leave without being delivered to a French port. Many organizers in Vietnam were dead or imprisoned. Their founder emerged alive, but weakened and without a secure road home. He disappeared once more into Asia. Survival had become his greatest political skill. Part 6. Return to the border. Nguyen Ai Quoc returned to Moscow in 1934, but the Soviet capital no longer welcomed him as a colonial leader. The Comintern and younger Vietnamese communists criticized his strategy as too nationalist and too willing to cooperate with other patriots. He studied at the International Lenin School, yet remained far from decisions about Vietnam. These were dangerous years. Stalin's purges consumed Soviet officials and foreign communists. Some activists trained in Moscow disappeared into prisons or execution grounds. Evidence does not show that Nguyen Ai Quoc was a major target, nor explain how he avoided the destruction around him. He kept a low profile and waited. By 1938, Japan's invasion of China had produced an alliance between Chinese nationalists and communists. Nguyen Ai Quoc left Moscow for China, where he worked around offices connected to the communist-led 8th Route Army. Using Chinese names, including Hu Guang, he observed guerrilla warfare, political education, and rural organization. Germany defeated France in June 1940. The administration in Indochina remained loyal to Vichy. But Japanese forces entered northern Vietnam later that year. French officials continued to govern while Japan held military power. Vietnamese people lived beneath overlapping empires, each demanding food, labor, and obedience. To Nguyen Ai Quoc, the crisis created an opportunity. France was weakened. Japan was stretched across Asia. A colonial system that had appeared permanent was beginning to fracture. On January 28, 1941, he crossed into Chao Bang province. He had been absent from Vietnam for almost 30 years. Near Pac Bo, he lived and worked among mountains, caves, and forests. Later revolutionary memory made this landscape sacred, but its practical value was clear. It lay close to China, protected by difficult terrain and supported by local communities. In May, Nguyen Ai Quoc presided over the 8th plenum of the Indo-Chinese Communist Party's Central Committee. The meeting placed national independence ahead of immediate class revolution. Socialism was not abandoned, but the urgent objective was to remove French and Japanese domination. From this strategy came the Viet Minh, the League for the Independence of Vietnam. It was communist-led but presented as a broad national front open to workers, peasants, intellectuals, merchants, religious believers, and anyone supporting independence. He knew that a small communist party could not seize a country alone. The Viet Minh built local committees, self-defense groups, propaganda teams, and supply networks. Its forces were modest, and its authority remained limited to remote northern districts. Victory was far from certain. But after 3 decades of exile, the revolutionary stood again on Vietnamese soil. He now had a base, an organization, and a war weakening both empires above his country. The long preparation was ending. The struggle for power was about to begin. Part 7. The Moment of Collapse. In August 1942, Nguyen Ai Quoc crossed into China seeking support for the Viet Minh. He carried papers under a newer name, Ho Chi Minh. Chinese nationalist authorities arrested him as a suspected spy. For more than a year, he was moved through prisons in Guangxi. The number of transfers is disputed, but the imprisonment is documented. He composed poems in classical Chinese, later collected as prison diary. They describe hunger, chains, disease, and confinement. Released in September 1943, he returned to the Viet Minh bases the following year. His movement remained small, but the war was moving closer. Under Vong Nguyen Giap, the Vietnam Propaganda Liberation Army was established in December 1944 with a few dozen fighters. Its early victories were limited but important. Armed struggle brought the Viet Minh prestige and weapons. During the winter of 1944 and spring of 1945, famine swept northern Vietnam. Japanese and French requisitions, transport failures, crop policies, flooding, and disrupted trade all contributed. Estimates range from several 100,000 deaths to 2 million. The number remains disputed, the suffering does not. The Viet Minh urged peasants to seize rice stores and presented itself as willing to act where authorities had failed. Hunger became political. On March 9, 1945, Japan overthrew the French administration. Emperor Bao Dai declared an independent empire of Vietnam under Japanese protection. The government included sincere nationalists, but lacked an army and freedom from Japan. Ho sought allies wherever possible. The Viet Minh rescued American airmen and provided intelligence on Japanese forces. In 1945, the American Office of Strategic Services contacted Ho and Giap. Its DEER team parachuted into Tan Treo, bringing radios, medical assistance, weapons, and limited training. The United States neither recognized Vietnamese independence nor endorsed Ho's program. For Washington, Japan was the enemy. For Ho, the relationship offered supplies and hope that America might oppose France's return. Then, in August 1945, Japan surrendered. Authority dissolved across Vietnam. Viet Minh leaders called for an uprising. Local committees, workers, students, and armed units seized offices and organized demonstrations. Hanoi came under Viet Minh control on August 19th. Hue followed, and Bao Dai abdicated. Power was also taken in Saigon, though southern politics remained divided. The August Revolution was not Ho Chi Minh's work alone. It depended on underground organization, local initiative, popular anger, other nationalist movements, and Japan's collapse. The Viet Minh prevailed because it was prepared while almost every authority was breaking apart. By late August, Ho entered Hanoi as head of a provisional government. 34 years after leaving Saigon as a kitchen worker, he stood on the edge of power. But independence had been seized before the returning empires agreed to surrender it. Part 8. Peace that never came. On September 2, 1945, Ho Chi Minh declared the Democratic Republic of Vietnam in Ba Dinh Square. His speech drew from the American Declaration of Independence and the French Declaration of the Rights of Man. It appealed to universal principles and to allied governments whose recognition he needed. The new state possessed enthusiasm but little security. Its treasury was nearly empty. Famine had devastated the north, much of the population could not read, and no major power recognized independence. Chinese nationalist troops entered northern Vietnam to disarm Japan, while British forces did the same in the south. In Saigon, British authorities enabled French troops to return. Fighting began on September 23 as France moved to recover its colony. In the north, Ho faced Chinese commanders and Vietnamese nationalist parties supported by them. His government included opposition figures and held elections in January 1946, but politics was neither peaceful nor fully free. The Communist Party publicly dissolved while continuing secretly. Viet Minh forces arrested, intimidated, and sometimes killed rivals. Responsibility for every disappearance is disputed, but the consolidation of power was real. Ho negotiated. On March 6, 1946, he signed an agreement with French Representative Jean Saintony. France recognized the Democratic Republic as a free state, with its own government, parliament, army, and finances, but inside the French Union. Vietnam accepted French troops in the north to replace the Chinese. A referendum was supposed to decide whether the South would reunite with Vietnam. Many Vietnamese saw the French return as betrayal. Ho argued that confronting France and the Chinese occupation together would be disastrous. The agreement bought time, but rested on incompatible ambitions. Ho wanted a sovereign, unified Vietnam. Powerful French officials intended to preserve imperial authority. Negotiations at Fontainebleau produced no settlement. Ho signed a temporary agreement in September, hoping to delay war, but violence continued. In November, a customs dispute in Haiphong escalated into fighting. French forces bombarded the city. Thousands of Vietnamese may have died, but estimates vary widely. Both sides prepared for a final break. French commanders demanded control of security in Hanoi. Vietnamese forces built barricades and moved supplies. On December 19th, fighting erupted across Hanoi. Viet Minh units attacked French positions and cut electricity, while French artillery answered. Each side blamed the other. The deeper conflict was clear. France would not accept the sovereignty the Democratic Republic demanded, and the Viet Minh would not accept restored colonial rule. Ho appealed for nationwide resistance and withdrew with his government toward the mountains. The president who had stood beneath flags in Ba Dinh returned to forests and hidden paths. Diplomacy had failed. The First Indochina War had begun. Part 9. The Empire Defeated. In the forests of Viet Bac, Ho Chi Minh's government survived without cities. Offices shifted between camps. Villagers supplied food, intelligence, and recruits, willingly or under pressure. France held major towns and roads, but struggled to control the countryside. In 1947, Operation Leah drove French forces into Viet Bac to capture Ho and break the leadership. It neared key headquarters but failed. The Viet Minh dispersed and returned after the French withdrew. Ho remained the political symbol and diplomat. Military strategy belonged increasingly to Vong Nguyen Giap and the armed leadership. Their war combined guerrilla attacks, political organization, and regular forces. Suspected collaborators were punished. Civilians endured French reprisals and demands from both camps. The balance changed with communist victory in China in 1949. In 1950, China and the Soviet Union recognized Ho's government. Weapons, advisors, and supplies crossed the border. The United States backed France and the rival state of Vietnam headed by Bao Dai. A colonial war was becoming part of the Cold War. During the border campaign of 1950, Giap's forces broke French positions along the frontier, opening supply routes and proving they could conduct larger operations. Ho visited the front but did not command its battles. In 1951, the communist organization reappeared as the Workers' Party of Vietnam. Ho became chairman and Truong Chin general secretary. Independence remained the cause, but social revolution moved closer to the center. Land reform accelerated in 1953 with Chinese advice. Land was confiscated and redistributed to poorer peasants. It met a real demand but brought public denunciations, imprisonment, and executions. Estimates of the dead vary widely. As senior leader, Ho approved the policy, though he did not direct every local case. In late 1953, France built an air-supplied fortress at Dien Bien Phu to draw the Viet Minh into a battle it expected to win. Giap encircled the valley, hauled artillery into the hills, and dug trenches toward the French. Chinese aid mattered. The siege also depended on Vietnamese laborers carrying supplies across mountains. The battle lasted from March 13th to May 7, 1954. The French surrender sent a powerful image across the colonial world. An Asian Revolutionary Army had defeated a European power in conventional battle. Victory did not bring unity. At Geneva, negotiators agreed to a ceasefire and temporary regrouping near the 17th parallel. Viet Minh forces moved north, French associated forces moved south. Elections were intended for 1956, but no strong mechanism guaranteed them. Ho accepted the compromise amid exhaustion and pressure from communist allies seeking to avoid wider conflict. In October 1954, he returned to Hanoi. The empire had retreated, but Vietnam was divided, and the United States was moving deeper into the south. One war had ended. The next was waiting. Part 10. The Man Becomes the Symbol. Returning to Hanoi in October 1954, Ho Chi Minh found France gone but the North exhausted. His government began reconstruction while building a socialist state. The costs soon became visible. Land reform teams classified families, staged denunciations, and punished alleged landlords. Many accusations were false. In 1956, the party released prisoners and restored some victim status. Ho acknowledged serious errors. Death estimates remain disputed, but the suffering does not. The national elections envisioned at Geneva never happened. Ngo Dinh Diem's southern government, backed by the United States, said it had not accepted the settlement and free elections were impossible in the north. The northern state was also authoritarian. Peaceful reunification faded. By the late 1950s, repression and resistance spread through the south. In 1959, Hanoi authorized armed support for revolution there. Routes through Laos grew into the Ho Chi Minh Trail. The National Liberation Front formed in 1960. Ho's image stood above the movement, but power in Hanoi was collective. Lu Duan became first secretary in 1960 and increasingly directed war strategy with other leaders. Ho retained prestige and influence, yet not every decision was his. Then the Americans arrived in overwhelming force. In 1965, United States combat troops landed in large numbers while American aircraft bombed the north. Cities darkened during air raids, roads and bridges were rebuilt. Elderly and in declining health, Ho still appeared before soldiers, workers, and diplomats, the father of the nation while war consumed more lives. The Tet Offensive of 1968 struck cities across the South. It failed to produce the expected uprising and brought enormous communist losses. But it shattered American claims that victory was near. Ho's precise role remains debated. Evidence gives Lu Duan and more militant leaders the central strategic role. Some accounts portray Ho and Vong Nguyen Giap as more cautious. Ho died in Hanoi on September 2, 1969, 24 years after declaring independence in Ba Dinh Square. His testament requested cremation, with ashes placed in the north, center, and south. Instead, the leadership embalmed his body and built a monumental mausoleum. Even in death, the man became the symbol. The war continued for nearly 6 years. Saigon fell in April 1975, and the reunited state later renamed it Ho Chi Minh City. His legacy resists simple judgment. To millions, he restored Vietnamese independence after colonial rule. To others, his name is inseparable from one-party power, repression, land reform violence, and a war of immense human cost. Both views contain history, neither is complete. He began as a young man leaving a colonized country under an uncertain name. He ended as the image of a revolution larger than any individual. Ho Chi Minh defied empires. But his victory left graves, borders, and questions that history has never put to rest.